Driving alone at night can be a number of things. It can be peaceful, it can be stressful, and sometimes it can even be downright terrifying. I'll never forget the time that I was driving through the back roads of Appleton, Wisconsin. I was on my way home from a meeting out of town and my car wasn't in the best shape, so I decided to stay off the highway. And that's probably my biggest regret of that trip. It was around 9:30 at night as I rounded a bend before being forced to slam on the brakes. My car came to a skidding halt and stopped itself about 3 feet away from a man that was just randomly walking down the middle of the road. They had their back turned to the car and were walking away from me, and I got this painful feeling in my gut when they had no reaction to my car almost hitting them. I sat there with my foot on the brake as I held my breath, wondering if they were going to turn around, but they just kept shuffling forward. It was like watching a zombie walking from behind. It seemed like the person wasn't picking their feet up as they moved slowly down the road. I thought about honking to get them to move, but something in the back of my head was telling me to just get out of there as fast as I could. I ended up listening to that feeling and slowly pulled around the person and began to drive past them. I looked over to see if I could make out what they looked like as I slowly drove past, but I couldn't make out a face through their hood. I kept holding my breath as I drove past and then quickly made my way up the road before being stopped by a traffic light. I waited at the light for a minute or so, and I couldn't help but wonder what that person was doing in the middle of the road and why I felt so scared when I was around them. And then I started thinking to myself what I would have wanted if I was walking down the road and needed help. I wouldn't want someone to be afraid of me, I would hope they would help. So, as the light turned green, against my better judgment, I decided to make a U-turn to drive back to them and make sure that they were okay. I tried to calm myself down as I felt the pit in my stomach come back, but as I got closer and closer to the spot where I had last seen them, I couldn't help but feel like it was a bad idea. I kept driving, and as I rounded the bend, I was forced to slam on my brakes again. This time, I laid on my horn as I found myself in the exact same situation as before. The man was now walking down the road in the opposite direction, so he was in the same lane as me. And once again, I only managed to stop a few inches before I hit him. The horn blared as I tried to catch my breath and calm myself down, but just like before, the man didn't react at all and just continued slowly moving down the street. This time I just sat and watched him for a minute, partially because I was curious, but mostly because I was too scared to pull forward and drive past him again. It took a little while, but once he was far enough away, I decided to pull a U-turn and just leave him to his business. I was about halfway through the turn when I realized I didn't swing it wide enough and needed to back up a bit and turn it into a 3-point turn. When I stopped though, that same feeling in my gut that was telling me to drive away told me to look out my window. I looked over to my right and was horrified to see that the man was now facing my car. His hood had fallen down and I could make out a near blank expression on his face before he suddenly started to scream at the top of his lungs. I looked down at the dashboard to make sure that I had the car in drive and then back up to the man who is now running right at my car. I screamed in terror as I pushed the pedal to the floor and pulled away from that area as fast as I could. This time, I didn't hit any stoplight and made it away from that man as fast as I could. I still can't quite explain what was going on that night, and all I know is that I'm very wary of driving at night now. It had been a long day, and I was finally on my way home from the beach after spending the day with my friends for one of their birthdays. I couldn't wait to be home, but I knew that there was a long drive ahead of me, so I stocked up on stuff to snack on and a coffee to keep myself awake for the drive. I drank the coffee too fast though, and by the time I was halfway through my drive at around 9 at night, I found myself having to use the bathroom. I started looking off to the side of the road to see if there was maybe a good place to stop when I noticed a small group of bushes off the side of the road. I pulled over and made sure that no one would see me as I ran out to use the bathroom. And in no time I was making my way back to the car when, out of the corner of my eye, I saw something that made me stop. I looked to my left and took a step back as my eyes locked onto the silhouette of something standing off in the field that I was walking through to get back to my car. I stood there trying to figure out what it was, but all I could make out was a pair of reflective eyes that let me know that whatever or whoever it was looking right back at me. I tried to keep my cool and think about what I should do, but I realized I didn't have much time when the figure started moving. It took me a second to realize, but sure enough, it was walking right at me. I slowly started moving and walking to my car as I kept my eyes locked on the shadow, and it did the same. I noticed that it wasn't moving much faster than I was when I saw that it was already halfway to me and I hadn't made it close to my car yet. That was when I decided to just make a run for it. I took off and sprinted back to my car as fast as I could, and as I got close, I could hear the footsteps of my pursuer getting closer and closer. I opened the car door and practically dove inside before slamming it shut. I hoped that would be enough as I started fumbling around for my keys, which I left in the cup holder, but was horrified when I heard the sound of the door click and start to open. I looked over to the window and let out a loud scream as I realized that I was being chased by a person. I quickly grabbed the handle on the inside of the door and pulled it shut before locking it. My eyes widened as I looked at their clothes and realized that they were wearing a jumpsuit that looked like it had numbers on the upper left chest pocket. That was when I remembered a sign that I had passed a few miles back that read, "Prison area, don't pick up hitchhikers." I did my best to get my keys into the ignition and turn my car on as the man tried to open the door. Once he realized it and the door behind it was locked, he tried to punch through the glass. But lucky for me, my car started and I managed to pull away from the side of the road. I stepped on the gas and tore down the road as fast as I could before I finally pulled over and called the police. I let them know that I was pretty sure that I just had a run-in with an escaped convict and told them where I was. I had to wait for an officer to make a statement, but then they sent me on my way. I tried to drive the rest of the way home following the speed limit, but I admit, I just wanted to get back to the safety of my own house, so I got there as fast as I could. I tell you, I'll never forget that drive ever again. I was on my way home from work one night, driving down the usual road that I took to get home, and I was surprised to see that there was actually another car on it. It was around 1 in the morning, and by that time the road was typically empty. I started to slow down a bit as I approached the car and noticed that they were driving at a really slow pace. The road was a 45, but they were going no faster than 20 miles per hour. I drove behind them for a minute, but when I saw that I was legally allowed to pass them, I checked to make sure it was safe, and then I sped up and began to drive right by them. But as I passed by the driver's side of their car, it was like I could sense the mood in the air change. The hair on my arm started to stand up, and I almost jumped out of my seat as I heard the roar of their engine get louder as they presumably stepped on the gas to speed up. I looked over at them and realized that they weren't going to let me pass, so I decided to slow back down and try to get back behind them. But as my car slowed down, so did theirs. They were matching my speed. And before I could figure out what to do next, I was surprised when I felt a hard slam from the passenger side of my car. They had just run into me. I tried to pull away from them as I noticed that they were getting ready to ram me again, but I couldn't do anything to stop them. I felt my car move to the side a bit, and it was hard to keep control of the steering wheel as they slammed into me again. After that, I slammed on the brakes and came to a complete stop, which caused them to pass by me. I sat in the middle of the road for a second as I hoped that it was all over, but I didn't have much time to recover as I noticed that the other car had also come to a stop. I looked up and saw that they were starting to reverse back toward me. My heart began to pound, and I didn't know what I should do. All I could think was to try to get away from them. So as they backed up toward me, I pulled forward as fast as I could and passed right by them. I didn't let up with my speed as I tore over the pavement, constantly checking my rearview mirror. I knew that they were following me. I just didn't know how far behind me they were. I took a second to pull my phone out of my pocket and called the cops to let them know that I was being chased by an aggressive driver. They told me to pull over and wait for the police, but I couldn't risk it as I noticed their headlights continuing to get closer. I put the pedal to the floor and continued driving as fast as I could, and even though I wasn't putting distance between us, I could tell that they weren't getting any closer. And finally, I had made it far enough around a bend that I couldn't see the headlights anymore. I took the opportunity that I had in front of me and quickly pulled off the main road and drove about 10 feet down a side trail and quickly turned my car off. I held my breath and hoped that the other car would just pass by and not notice that I was hiding. And after a minute, I was relieved to see it work. I saw the other car drive by, and they were going at least 50 miles per hour at that point. Once I was safe, I called the police and updated them on my location, which is where they met me. They took my statement, and then one of the officers was nice enough to escort me home. After that night, I decided to take the main road to my house, even if it means dealing with a little more traffic after a long day at work. It's better than dealing with a random road rage incident, that's for sure.